Hello friends, welcome to my channel. Within this video, I'm going to start a new series over the Spring security implementation. So with this series, I'm going to implement different way of security application within the any enterprise application. And this particular video is quite focused over the in-memory based authentication implementation. So within this video, I'm going to take a coding exercise and give you the high level detail what exactly the Spring security framework is and how it can be implemented to apply security within the applications. All right, so without wasting time, let's start. What exactly the Spring security is? First we need to understand this. Within any enterprise application, security is the most important concern, because no application owner will want that you know any other user, any outsider can access its application or access its data without any proper validation, without any proper authentications. Okay, so security is very important, and without security, any user, any outsider can access data of my application, and which can be hazardous for my enterprise application, right? That user can access that data, that user can manipulate that data, and it can be quite dangerous. So it is very important to have a security within the any application. All right, now Spring framework provides the solution for implementing the security. Within Spring framework, we are having a libraries, binaries for the security, and with that framework, same Spring security framework, we can implement different way of providing a security within our application. Okay, now there could be a different operations provided by the Spring security, but I'm going to take you over the two major operations with this video. First one is the authentication. What exactly the authentication is? Authentication is like authenticating whether a particular user who is trying to access your application is a valid user or not. Let's suppose myself, Manoj, I want to access your application or any application. That application want to authenticate me first with user ID and valid password only. Application is able to recognize that yes, this is the valid user, and this is the same user who is trying to access that particular application, no anyone else. Okay, that's why authentication is proving that yes, you are a user, but you have to prove that you are the same user what you are claiming. All right, now within the authentication, user ID and login credential based authentication is the first level authentication, and there can be a second level authentication where we can provide biometric authentication. After login ID and password is validated, maybe the application would have a implementation for validating the biometric authentication. That is the second level authentication. Although this particular topic is out of the scope of my this current video, so I'm not going to give you the more detail in that, but just for the high level, yeah, authentication can have a first level, second level, and something like that. All right, now after authentication operation, second very major operation what Spring security framework provides is authorization. Now what exactly the authorization is? Now application validated the user with this login credential. Okay, you are a valid user with the valid password, but it need to be validate whether you are is authorized user for that particular data or resource what you are trying to access. Let's take an example. We are having a application which is managing the daily routine of appointments for the doctor, and that particular application can be accessed by the patients also for checking the prescription slips or report. So now patients have a requirement to access the resources or data corresponding to them. Right, we can put them constraint that one patient ABC cannot access a data of another patient. So that means that one particular patient is only authorized to access the data of himself or herself, not for the other. All right, now having that much of detail, I would like to take you the architecture what Spring framework provide in terms of Spring security. But before that, I will try to take a coding exercise. I will going to implement a one REST API, and with the REST API I'm going to show you and demo you that how we are going to implement the Spring security and how we are going to achieve authentication plus authorization. And after that I'm going to explain you the architecture. Once having the hands-on on the coding exercise, you will able to actually map the conceptual point of the architecture, and it will be very easy to digest at that time. All right, so let's go to the coding exercise. So for coding exercise within the Spring Boot, to create my project, I am here on Spring initialization. I hope you must be aware of that. So I'm going to generate one project. That project would be Maven based Java, and Spring Boot version would be 2.04 I'm using, and group I have already provided, and the artifact I have already provided. Now within that, with providing web, you can select, okay, you are going to create a one web MVC based application. I've already selected. This is the there, so I can generate the project. Okay, my project is generated, and next step I need to import it to my code base. So actually friends, I have already imported, so I'm not going to duplicate that effort. So here is the project structure. This is my POM. Okay, within POM we can quickly traverse. We have selected the web, so we got a Spring Boot starter web dependency added and the Spring Boot starter test also. So both the dependencies are added. Okay, and this is the plugin for the Maven. We don't have anything else. Okay, now here we can see within Java, Spring Initial create one more particular Java class. This is the main class, and it is going to starting point. Now I need to start with the coding. So first I'm going to create a one REST service. Okay, let me quickly create one controller class. Within controller, as I need to create REST API, so first let me add the REST control annotation. Then for this particular class, maybe I can put request resource mapping, so that request can be mapped to this. We can put it here student. Now within this, let me quickly have one more request mapping for public student. This is that, and let's say here it will be just printing one message. Alright, so this is my controller class. Now within my class I have to provide my component scan base package is equal to components. Alright, so I've created my REST. Let me start this application. So it's starting my application. Yeah, it already started. Okay, now once it got started, let me quickly check that. On port 8080 I am accessing my, alright, okay, resource is there, hello user. Alright, it's working. So the resource I have created the student, and we provide that resource mapping. student, and within the student we are having a resource mapping for this particular method, and it is accessible. So this particular method is not going to create any kind of JSON or XML based heavyweight response. It is just a simple message, because our intent is to implement the security, not the implementation of the full-fledged REST API. Alright, so now once I'm having a one dummy sample REST API, next step it would be the how we are going to implement our security. Okay, now to implement the security, what we need to do is first we need to provide our binaries. Okay, so we need to add a dependency so that we can have our Spring Security frameworks active. So for that, I have just here copy one of my dependency that need to be included. We can quickly just paste it here. So this is the dependency Spring Boot Starter Security that we need to put it here. And once we had this security dependency added, we need to upgrade quickly project. Now it is resolving actually the dependency and going to add all the binaries. We can quickly check that. See here. Okay, we provide the security, but we got 3 different jar files got added, and all these 3 are very mandatory for implementing the security framework. Okay, now as a next step, let me create one configuration class where I'm going to write all my configuration, what kind of security I want to implement. That will be the custom implementation. So first let me put package student security. Alright, now within that we need to extend another class actually, and that class is web security configure adapter. Now what exactly this, why we are adding all these are important questions, but we are going to take it separately. And I have to add enable web security also, that is very much required. Also I need to provide another annotation configuration so that Spring Framework will be able to understand, okay, these are the configurations. And within my main class I have to add one more package for scanning. So let me have that this way. There are different way for that doing that, so you don't need to follow just my way, but I'm actually writing separate packages. You can have a parent package and that will be all, but this is the way of how I'm doing. Alright, okay, so now I'm having my configuration class for security. What would be the next step? As this particular class I'm going to provide the custom security, and it is basically extending the configurator adapter, so which provide different overridden method, and I am going to override one particular method which is configure. Okay, now what exactly this configure method is, definitely I'm going to take you to the detail, so don't worry about that. It will be now within this configure method we are going to have this argument of authentication manager builder. Basically the framework or I can say that this parent class is going to provide this particular method, and we are going to override that. And this particular element of the Spring Security framework is actually the placeholder where we can provide the different users. Once we got populated different users with their login credential in this particular element, my Spring Security framework is got implemented and my request is got started asking for that login credential, and without passing that it is not going to work. Okay, let me show you how to provide that. Now this is basically based on the builder design pattern, and within that I am going to populate authentication based on the in-memory authentication. So this is very important step. So within builder I'm going to build this with the in-memory authentication, and this is the way for that. Here I'm going to provide the password encoder. Okay, forget this step as of now. Like, as a next step, I can provide with user, and let me put some dummy username. Let's say Manoj. Password is, let's say, test. Okay, and I need to provide the role also here itself. So there are predefined role, admin and user. Two predefined role provided by Spring Security. There are other roles also, but these are two important roles, admin and the user. So right now the user Manoj, I'm going to provide the role of the admin. Okay, now this is asking for exception throw statement, which I have added. So this particular configuration is over. All right. Yeah, nothing left. Let me restart my boot. Okay, it started. Now within the browser, if you are going to hit that, it is asking for your username and password. Let's say Manoj and test. So why it's not working. Actually, when I check the console, it is actually throwing an exception, illegal argument, and that why, because we have not provided the password encoding. This is the important step. In fact, if you remember, I was earlier passing that, but I skipped that. I just want to show that this is so that you will be able to remember that this password is actually, it's a general tendency. You always used to have the password in an encrypted form. Even if we are storing our password in our database, we cannot put the password directly without any kind of encryption. Otherwise, any person who can have access of a database, he can read the username and password, right? So password encoding is quite important within the Spring Security framework. And how I'm going to provide that? So I have to use one password encoder interface, encoder, and there are various type of encoding scheme actually provided by Spring Security. I'm going to use the bcrypt based password encoder. Okay, so here first I need to provide that in-memory authentication is going to use this particular password encoder, and here also my password need to be encoded. It cannot be used directly. Encode, and here we are. Okay, so how it is, I've created, first I've instantiated one bcrypt password encoder type, and with that first I provided a scheme that okay, this is an in-memory authentication, but we are going to use this particular password encoder, and I have encoded my password also. Okay, let me quickly restart. Yep, started. Let's hit it again. Notch. It's working. At least it's able to proceed, and it throw the exception. Why it throw the exception? Student. Yeah, here. Actually, the URI was not working. Okay, now for one more thing, like this till yet I was using the browser, but I want to demo you the Postman also. Postman is a tool and very much popular and very flexible tool for especially testing the API REST APIs. So here is my student API, and Manoj test I have already provided. Let me clear that and update the request, and let's send that. No result because I am not providing the authentication. Let me quickly provide that. Show password and set hello user. Okay, it's working. So far what we have actually provided, I have created one user with its password, and I have assigned a role also, and while logging we are able to authenticate the user. So far we have covered the authentication part. Please remind that this is just the authentication part. This particular user has provided some role, but role based authorization I have not implemented so far. Okay, still when I'm clicking this URI, it is working. Why? Because of default implementation. Right now there is no resource mapping has been validating against any kind of role. For all the role, for all the user, every kind of resource is accessible. If the user is using the Manoj for with the correct password, he can access all the resource. So this is the authentication. Now let's jump to authorization part, how we are going to implement the authorization. So let me again override one more method configure, but this time I'm going to use another element. HTTP security, HTTP. Now HTTP security is another element in which I can provide the URL based, or you can say the resource and role based mapping, and I can provide the configuration that which particular resource is authorized for which particular resource. Okay, now this particular configuration would be using ant matcher, and within ant matcher I can provide my resource actually. Okay, now this is my resource, let's student, or let's say maybe I can provide my pattern something like this. So this is my URI pattern which I want to validate. This is my resource, and I want to authorize request in such a way that any request having this particular pattern should have role of admin. Okay, and this is HTTP basic authorization. Now again it's giving error. Okay, yeah, we have provided. Alright, so now actually what we have coded is that within HTTP security element we have provided pattern of the URI, and this is my resource, this is representing the source, and this resource should be accessible to any request which is having a resource, the user having a role of admin. Okay, now let's quickly test this. Okay, one more thing, let me add one more user so that we can have positive or negative test scenario. Password, and this time I'm going to provide role as a user. So now we got two different role. Okay, so we are having two resources, Manoj and ABC. Manoj is the admin user, ABC is the general user, and we have provided authentication with that student is my resource which is accessible by only that user which is having an admin role. Alright, so let's go to the postman again. Let me give the correct password and let's try it. Yep, it's working. So for Manoj it is accessible, authorization is working. Let me try now ABC. See, forbidden. It is giving error message as a forbidden because student is my resource. This is my URI which is representing the resource in the REST API, and this resource is forbidden for user ABC. Alright, now this is called as authorization. Though ABC and test123 is the valid user, login credentials are correct, everything is correct, authentication is working, but authorization is failing. Alright, okay. So we have checked that how to provide the authentication and how to provide the authorization. So our coding exercise is complete. Now let me take you to the presentation again so that I can demo you the concept. Now before starting, actually I would like to give you the high level idea of servlet filters, and I'm hoping that you have this idea. I'm just trying to recap. So within the my application, once request used to come from the client, the within my servlet container, basically it is going to listen up, and that request is used to handle by the servlet container, and servlet container is used to invoke the servlet. So request will be going to invoke to the servlet, and the servlet will generate the response that will go back to the servlet container, and from servlet container it will hand it over to as a response to the client. Now within this we are having a flexibility to provide different kind of filters. So servlet filter is a very key component which handled by the servlet container, and within this filter we can provide any kind of checks, different type of filtering techniques we can use to validate our incoming request, whether those are valid or any kind of check, any kind of filtering we can provide. So this is the key. This servlet filter is the key of the Spring Security Framework also. Okay, now within the Spring Security Framework we are having two different contexts. One is servlet context and one is Spring application context. So Spring container is actually handling this, and that servlet container is actually handling this. Now servlet container used to create like servlet context, and within that we can provide different filters. But in case of Spring framework is using and creating different kind of filters as a POJO. It is not creating as a servlet. Okay, we are creating the filters as a POJO, and which these filters which are POJO classes, these classes, it will be going to reside in our application context of the Spring. Okay, now in that situation, when our servlet basically we like our servlet context need to delegate the responsibility to filtering to the application context. Okay, because these filters are not available in the servlet context, so we have to delegate that request. Now for that delegation we need a one delegating filter proxy. This is provided by the Spring framework itself. So what is the purpose of the Spring filter proxy? Basically it is for the delegating the request from servlet context to the application context, and within application we can configure n number of filter as per our requirement, and those filter will get activated, and it is going to check our request based on what our custom filtering criteria we have provided. Alright, let me take to another slide. Okay, yeah, here is my web.xml. So this is the code snippet. Within this sample code, actually what I'm doing is I'm implementing my delegating filter proxy class. This is my delegating proxy, and it is going to delegate my request from servlet context to the application context. And this is particular implementation I'm providing Spring Security Filter Chain. So this particular delegating filter proxy class is going to delegate this particular chain, the request, and here is the URL petal. So all the request is going to delegate that. Now you might have a question that why we have not configured this kind of configuration in web.xml when I started my coding exercise. That because right now I'm implementing everything with a Spring Boot. Spring Boot is like boon for the developer. Before the Spring Boot we have to provide all those configuration. This configuration is very much mandatory. It is required while implementing the Spring Security, right? But when we are creating the Spring Boot, it's providing the flexibility actually to just give me the high level idea that what exactly the developer required. When I was creating my project, actually using Spring initializer, I provided that okay, my dependency would be the web. Now this dependency is actually available in the class path, and Spring Boot framework is generating my whole project with all the dependency. Okay, let me show you the form quickly. See here we are having a dependency for whole WebMVC framework and the test framework itself. If you are going to see the dependencies, there are so many different libraries are available, although we have just provided the three dependency here. This is because these are the starter dependency, and this is a very famous questions when you are going to discuss with anyone for the Spring framework. This is a very important question. What are the starter dependency? Starter dependency is sort of the dependency management itself, right? It is not just a one dependency. It is the chain of dependency. Using starter dependency, you can provide what kind of like framework you are going to use. Like WebMVC you are going to use, you provided a starter web. I was using the security framework, I just provided the starter security. Now this dependency is going to inject all the binaries which are associated with security. Like when I implement the security, it provided the 3 libraries, right? Similarly for web, we got all those. So that is the reason Spring Boot provide this kind of advantage to the Spring Boot developer, that it is going to take care everything. In the same way, developer don't need to configure this now with the Spring Boot application. Framework itself is going to provide all those, because framework know that yes, like sync security is going to be implemented and delegating filter proxy is going to be implemented. So this is internally handled by the Spring framework now. Okay, now after understanding this delegated frequency, there is one more component, is filter chain proxy. What exactly this and why we need this? Actually, when we are having a multiple filters, right, multiple filter beans or POJO, then we need to provide separate configuration or separate mapping with the delegating filter proxy for each filter in web.xml. That means if we are having a 10 different filter, I would be requiring 10 different mapping here. Here I'm just having a one, but if I'm having a different 10 filters, I have to provide the mapping for each filter corresponding with the delegating filter proxy. Now this will be a conversion. Suppose I'm just having a 10 or 20 filters, then in that case my web.xml is going to so much voluminous, and it is not going to be a good. Of course I want to reduce that, right? Readability is going to create a problem. So of course, to handle this, instead of just saying that okay, I'm going to have a 10 filter, I can create a chain of filter, right? Now in that situation, this filter chain proxy is come to the picture. We are having a multiple filters, having a chain of filter which going to execute in the sequence itself, in the order whatever we are defined, and this whole set used to create a sort of filter chain. And filter chain proxy is my class which I'm going to map inside web.xml with my delegating filter proxy class. Alright, that's how we come up here. Here I'm just mapping delegating filter proxy class with my filter chain. Alright, and this filter chain, once delegated in application context, is this particular class is going to take care of all the delegation and execution of all the filter in one shot. Okay, I don't need to provide separate mapping for each filter with the delegating filter proxy in web.xml now, because I'm implementing filter chain proxy. So this is the importance of filter chain proxy. Alright, now here I am showing these are the mandatory filter, a sort of different filter provided by the Spring security framework, like integrating filter, authentication filter. After that, if there is any kind of failure within the authentication process, there is the exception translation filter, and there is a security interceptors also. So the kind of URL is coming, whether those are valid, whether authorized, and all those stuff. So these are the filters which is provided by the Spring security framework. Now there might be the question that we even didn't implemented this filter when I started my coding. Of course we didn't. If you remember that when I didn't implemented my Spring security configuration class, I mean by that I created my controller class for REST API, but I have not implemented this first. Okay, and at that time my REST API is working perfectly fine, although without any kind of security. Even at that time, all these filters are working. Okay, because these are the default implementation provided by the Spring security framework itself, and those filter was having any the blank implementation. They are not having any code, right? That's why I'm saying there's a default implementation, and as there is a default implementation, it's not checking anything actually. So any request is allowed, right? Any user who is trying to access any resource, everything is working fine. The moment we got Spring security implemented with the configuration, it start validating my custom configuration whatever provided. Now here is the importance of my web security configure adapter. Now this particular parent class is actually allowing me to create different kind of configuration. All right, and that's why it's providing the overridden method configure. Now with this method I can provide different kind of configuration for different elements. Okay, like I use the two here, authentication manager builder, and another one is my HTTP security. So while overriding my configure method with my parameter authentication manager builder, basically I am providing the configuration for my authentication manager builder, and this particular builder is responsible for the username and password configuration. It used to manage that. It used to manage the user with their login credential and with their role. All right, and HTTP security is another element which I used in second method, and here I am populating this element with my interceptor URLs and kind of authorization, that for one particular URL what kind of role has been authorized with. All right, so I provided two different configuration, one for authentication manager builder, another for HTTP security. Okay, now this is my configuration and how it is working behind the scene. Let me quickly go to next slide. So this is the kind of architecture flow what is happening behind the scene, and these are the different filter stacks, okay, within the security framework. Now request is coming and passing through all the filters. So earlier when we are not having any kind of custom configuration for the security, it was the default implementation, blank implementation. All methods are there, everything is working fine there, but there was no constraint, no security. So every request is reaching to my controllers and response is getting back. Now the moment I provided my configuration with my custom implementation, those implementation got injected in these filters. Okay, and those my custom code actually start getting executed, and it is started, the filters are validated my start validating my request against my custom configuration whatever provided. Now here in this example I'm showing like authentication manager. This is the responsible for like user and login credential and the role, as I said earlier, right? There is a different way actually to provide this configuration, and one of the way is via user detail service, which I'm going to demo in my next video. So and but here actually within this code example I use simple configure adapter itself. With the configuration adapter I can provide n number of configurations, so I use the two configuration. One is authentication manager builder, another one HTTP security. All right, so once those authentication configuration or authorization configuration provided, those got injected in this filter, and my request start getting validating against those kind of custom configuration, right? And that's how I got my security injected during the request flow, and this is the whole architecture flow. I hope it's clear, my friends. All right, so here I got completed with my implementation. I've shown you like how to implement the authentication and authorization with the Spring Security Framework, and the code, the whole project for this is available in my GitHub, and I provided the link in the description box of the video. You can download that and you can implement yourself. So I will appreciate if you can subscribe my channel, and I hope if you like my video, please share with your friends. All right, thanks for watching my video.